Captain Riley Martinez sat in what could generously be called a chair, if chairs were designed by committee, and that committee really hated comfort. The Galactic Council's courtroom looked like someone had asked an AI to design intimidating space architecture. And the AI had been having a particularly bad day. "So, am I in?" Riley said, examining her fingernails with the kind of casual indifference that made alien bureaucrats break out in whatever passed for hives on their respective homeworlds. "We're really doing this whole dramatic trial thing? Because I've got places to be." "Well, I did. Before you impounded my ship." Grand Chancellor Vex Morian, whose name sounded like a sneeze in 3 different languages, rustled his ceremonial robes. He was approximately 8 feet tall, purple, and had way too many eyes for Riley's comfort. Not that she'd ever admit to being uncomfortable. "Captain Martinez," Vex Morian's voice boomed through the chamber's translation system, which made everyone sound like they were gargling marbles. "You stand accused of reckless endangerment, destruction of property, and..." He paused dramatically. "Orbital mechanics violations." "Orbital mechanics violations?" Riley snorted. "That's not even a real crime. That's like charging someone with aggressive parallel parking." Minister Krilltak, Vex Morian's perpetually anxious assistant, who looked like a cross between a praying mantis and a tax auditor, shuffled his papers nervously. "The defendant's actions resulted in the destruction of 3 space stations, the displacement of 14 cargo vessels, and the complete disappearance of Kepler 442 billion's smaller moon." "Okay, first of all." Riley held up a finger. "That moon was already structurally unsound. I basically did everyone a favor by giving it a gentle nudge toward that black hole. And second, those space stations were totally in the shipping lane. What kind of idiot puts a rest stop in the middle of a hyperspace corridor?" The assembled alien dignitaries exchanged looks that transcended species barriers, all conveying the same message: humans were absolutely insane. "The point, Captain Martinez," Vex Morian continued, "is that your species has proven problematic. In the 3 years since first contact, humans have caused more intergalactic incidents than the previous century combined." "Hey, we're efficient like that." "Efficient at chaos," muttered Krilltak. "The best kind of efficient," Riley shot back cheerfully. Vex Morian's multiple eyes narrowed in what Riley assumed was the alien equivalent of a death glare. "The Council has reached a decision. Humanity will undergo the trial of worthiness to determine if your species deserves continued membership in civilized galactic society." "And if we fail this trial?" Riley asked, though her tone suggested she was asking about the weather. "Then humanity will be relocated to a nice, quiet sector, far away from anything important. Forever." Riley leaned back in the uncomfortable chair and grinned. "Sounds like a challenge. I like challenges." The collective shudder that went through the alien assembly was palpable. They were beginning to remember why dealing with humans was considered a hardship posting in the diplomatic corps. The next morning, or what passed for morning in a space station that operated on 17 different time zones, Riley found herself standing in what the aliens called the preparation chamber. It looked like a cross between a medical bay and a medieval torture chamber, which probably wasn't accidental. "Behold," Grand Chancellor Vex Morian announced with the kind of dramatic flair usually reserved for bad dinner theater, "the Nexus Gauntlet." A holographic display materialized, showing what appeared to be a death maze designed by someone with serious anger management issues. Twisting corridors, spinning blades, pools of bubbling acid, and creatures that looked like they'd been rejected from a horror movie for being too scary. "Over the past millennium," Vex Morian continued, "only 2% of participants have survived the gauntlet. The other 98%, well, let's just say the janitor droids earn their pay." Minister Krilltak pulled up statistics with the enthusiasm of someone who really enjoyed other people's suffering. "The current record holder is Zulthak the Merciless, who completed the trial in 4 hours and 37 minutes before dying of his injuries." "Very inspiring stuff." "Inspiring," Riley repeated flatly. "Right. So this is basically a death trap disguised as a test." "The trial consists of 7 chambers," Vex Morian explained, ignoring her comment. "Each designed to test different aspects of survival, physical endurance, mental acuity, problem-solving under pressure, and the will to continue when all hope is lost." Sounds like a Tuesday in Detroit. The first chamber features gravity fluctuations that will crush most beings into paste. Kriltak read from his tablet with disturbing glee. The second contains acid pools that dissolve organic matter on contact. The third houses the devourer of minds, a creature that feeds on conscious thought. Riley yawned. Is there catering? Because this sounds like it might take a while. The fourth chamber contains laser grids that adjust to your movement patterns, Vex Morian continued, his confidence growing with each horrific detail. The fifth features temporal distortions that age participants decades in minutes. The sixth houses the puzzle of infinite recursion, which has driven the greatest minds in the galaxy to madness. And the seventh? Riley asked, though she sounded more bored than terrified. The Guardian Chamber? Vex Morian's voice dropped to what he probably thought was an ominous whisper. Where the final test awaits. Let me guess. Big monster. Probably tentacles, definitely bad breath. Kriltak's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. The Guardian is unique. It has never been defeated. Well, Riley said, stretching like she was about to go for a jog rather than face almost certain death, there's a first time for everything. When do we start? Marai. You may have one final meal. Write any last words. Contact your family. Nah, I'm good. Let's get this show on the road. I've got a reputation to maintain, and standing around chatting isn't really my style. The aliens exchanged glances again. Humans really were disturbing creatures. Very well, Vex Morian said. The trial begins now. The chamber door opened with a hiss, revealing a corridor that somehow managed to look both futuristic and medieval at the same time. Riley cracked her knuckles and walked toward it. Hey, she called over her shoulder. Is there a bathroom break halfway through? Because I'm not dying with a full bladder. Riley stepped into the first chamber and immediately felt like she'd walked into a washing machine being operated by a drunk elephant. The gravity shifted every 3 seconds, going from crushing weight to weightlessness and back again. Most species would have been reduced to jelly in the first 30 seconds. Oh, come on, Riley muttered, riding out a particularly vicious gravity wave. This is just like that roller coaster at Six Flags. The one they shut down after the lawsuit. She adapted to the rhythm with the kind of stubborn determination that had made humans the galaxy's most successful invasive species. Step, duck, roll, wait for the crushing weight, then spring forward during the brief moment of normal gravity. It was like a really aggressive dance routine. Seriously, though, she called out to the observation deck where she could see alien faces pressed against the viewing windows. Who designed this place? Because they clearly never heard of OSHA standards. The second chamber opened to reveal pools of bubbling acid that would dissolve most organic compounds in seconds. Warning signs in 43 languages all basically said, do not touch, or you will die horribly. Riley examined the narrow walkways between the pools, tested their stability, and shrugged. It's like that chemical plant in New Jersey. Except this smells better. She hopscotched across with the casual confidence of someone who'd grown up in a world where slightly toxic was considered a selling point for vacation destinations. The acid hissed and bubbled menacingly, but Riley was already used to dodging worse things on her morning commute. The third chamber housed the devourer of minds, a writhing mass of tentacles and teeth that was supposed to feast on conscious thought. It emerged from the shadows with a sound like a garbage disposal having an existential crisis. Oh, hey there, buddy, Riley said conversationally. You must be the mind reader. That's cool. Fair warning, though, you probably don't want to go digging around in my brain. It's mostly coffee, spite, and really bad jokes. The creature paused, tentacles wavering. Most beings cowered in terror when faced with the devourer. This human was chatting? I'm serious, Riley continued, walking closer. Last week I spent 2 hours thinking about whether hot dogs are sandwiches. You really want to experience that kind of mental confusion? The devourer made what might have been a whimpering sound and retreated deeper into its chamber. Riley patted one of its tentacles sympathetically as she passed. Smart choice, pal. From the observation deck, Grand Chancellor Vex Morian watched in growing horror as the human treated his elaborate death trap like a mild inconvenience. This was not going according to plan. Is she actually enjoying this? Minister Krill whispered. It would appear so, Vex Morian replied, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. This is highly irregular. Riley waved cheerfully at the viewing window as she approached the fourth chamber. How am I doing so far? Should I be dead by now? Because I feel pretty good. The fourth chamber's laser grid activated the moment Riley stepped inside. Thousands of deadly beams crisscrossed the space, creating a pattern that would slice most beings into convenient bite-sized pieces. The system was designed to adapt and learn, making escape theoretically impossible. Riley studied the pattern for about 30 seconds, then shrugged off her jacket. You know what your problem is? She said to the laser grid, as if it could hear her. You're thinking too hard about this. She wadded up the jacket and threw it at the control panel. The fabric, still damp with sweat and containing enough synthetic materials to power a small city, hit the exposed circuitry and caused a spectacular light show. Sparks flew, alarms blared, and the laser grid flickered and died. Sometimes the simple solution is the best solution, Riley announced to the watching aliens, who were now making distressed chittering sounds. The fifth chamber was supposed to age her decades in minutes through temporal distortion. Riley walked in, felt the familiar tingle of chronoton particles, and laughed. Oh, this is just like that spa treatment I got in Bangkok. Except that one actually worked. She strolled through the temporal field like it was a light breeze. Growing up on a planet where time zones were more like suggestions and jet lag was a permanent state of being had given humans an unusual resistance to temporal shenanigans. The sixth chamber contained the puzzle of infinite recursion, a mind-bending mathematical paradox that had supposedly driven the galaxy's greatest intellects to gibbering madness. Complex equations floated in the air, shifting and changing in patterns that hurt to look at. Riley walked around the whole thing. Yeah, I'm not doing math today, she announced. I did math in high school. That was enough. The puzzle, designed to trap victims in endless logical loops, had no response to being completely ignored. Riley found the exit door behind the main display and kept walking. From the observation deck, what could only be described as panic was beginning to set in. She's not supposed to be able to do that, Krill whispered, his voice reaching frequencies that only dogs and very anxious aliens could hear. The trials are perfect, Vex Morian insisted, though his confident tone was developing cracks. They have been tested for centuries. No one simply walks around the puzzle of infinite recursion. Apparently humans do, observed Ambassador Quell Nax, a lizard-like being who'd been quietly taking notes. Fascinating species. No respect for established impossibilities. Riley had stopped just outside the seventh chamber and was digging through her pockets. She pulled out half a sandwich, examined it critically, and took a bite. Still good, she announced. Okay, what's behind door number 7? Let me guess, big scary monster, probably hungry, definitely grumpy about being stuck in a box all day. The Guardian Chamber's doors opened with a sound like a tomb being unsealed, which was probably intentional. The creature that emerged was something out of nightmares, 20 feet tall, covered in spikes, with claws that could shred steel and a roar that shattered glass 3 sectors away. Riley looked up at it and sighed. You know what, big guy? You look hungry. Want some sandwich? She held out the remaining half of her lunch. The Guardian, who had been working up to a proper terrorizing rampage, paused. In its millennia of existence, no one had ever offered it food. It's turkey and Swiss, Riley continued conversationally. A little bit of mustard, some of those good pickles. My grandmother's recipe. The creature, more confused than anything else, gently took the sandwich with one massive claw and sniffed it. Then, with the delicacy of a creature that had learned to be careful with small things, it took a bite. Its eyes, which had been glowing with murderous intent, softened. The Guardian made a sound that might have been pleasure. Good, right? Grandma always said the secret was the bread. You gotta toast it just right, not too much, not too little. And that was how Captain Riley Martinez defeated the undefeatable Guardian of the Nexus Gauntlet. With kindness, a good sandwich, and the kind of casual human friendliness that treated interdimensional monsters like neighbors who just needed a good meal. Riley sat cross-legged next to the Guardian, who had curled up like the galaxy's most dangerous house cat, and was taking a nap after its first meal in several centuries. She was using the creature's massive flank as a backrest while she examined the chamber's control systems. Well, she muttered, tracing fiber optic cables with her finger. What do we have here? The control panel was more complex than necessary, with readouts in 17 different languages and enough redundant systems to run a small planet. But Riley had spent enough time jury-rigging broken starship systems to recognize deliberate overcomplication when she saw it. "You sneaky little bureaucrats," she said with growing amusement. "This whole thing is rigged." She'd found the master control system, hidden behind layers of intimidating-looking but ultimately cosmetic interfaces. The Nexus Gauntlet wasn't just a trial. It was an execution device dressed up as a test. The gravity fluctuations were designed to increase until they liquefied organic matter. The acid was programmed to overflow its containments after a set time. Even the Guardian had behavioral modification chips that would have driven it into an uncontrollable rage. 2% survival rate, my ass, Riley snorted. More like 0%, with the occasional lucky accident. She started pulling cables and rerouting power systems with the kind of creative vandalism that had made her famous across 3 star systems. Warning lights began flashing as safety protocols registered impossible readings. From the observation deck, the assembled aliens watched in growing horror as their perfect death trap began displaying error messages in fonts too cheerful for the circumstances. "What is she doing?" Vex Morian demanded. "I believe," said Ambassador Quelnax with what might have been admiration, "she is taking your trial apart from the inside." Riley had found the communication system and patched herself into the observation deck's audio feed. "Hey there, Council folks," her voice crackled through the speakers with the kind of aggressive cheer that usually preceded very bad news. "Having fun watching your murder maze? Because I've got some notes." "Captain Martinez," Vex Morian's voice was strained. "You have completed the trial. Please proceed to the exit." "Oh, I'll proceed all right. But first, let's talk about this whole setup. Because I've been looking at your control systems and buddy, this thing is more rigged than a carnival game." She'd managed to access the trial's historical records, and the data was damning. Thousands of beings had entered the Nexus Gauntlet over the centuries. None had been intended to survive. Looks like every species that got too uppity, too independent, or too inconvenient ended up taking your little test. And funny thing, they all seem to have died from tragic accidents. What are the odds? The silence from the observation deck was deafening. "So here's what's going to happen," Riley continued, her voice taking on the tone of someone who'd gone from annoyed to genuinely angry. "I'm going to finish your trial. But I'm going to do it my way." She patted the Guardian, who rumbled contentedly in its sleep. "Sweet dreams, big guy. Things are about to get interesting." Riley stood up and cracked her knuckles. "Time to show these aliens what happened when you tried to murder a human with style." Riley's first act of rebellion was to reprogram the Nexus Gauntlet safety protocols. Instead of ensure participant death, the new primary directive was maximum embarrassment for observers. She rerouted power systems, reversed gravity generators, and turned the whole facility into the galaxy's most expensive prank. "Computer," she said to the facility's AI, which had been programmed to sound ominous but mostly just sounded like it needed a throat lozenge. "Initiate evacuation protocol. But make it fun." The Nexus Gauntlet began playing festive music as emergency lights flashed in rainbow colors. The observation deck's artificial gravity reversed, sending startled alien dignitaries floating toward the ceiling. Acid pools drained and refilled with what appeared to be strawberry gelatin. The laser grids reactivated, but now they were projecting disco patterns instead of death rays. "What is happening?" Vex Morian shrieked as he bumped against the ceiling in a most undignified manner. "I'm redecorating," Riley's voice echoed through the facility. "Your death trap had terrible feng shui, very negative energy." She'd made her way back to the Guardian chamber, where her new friend was still napping peacefully. The massive creature had apparently decided that anyone who brought sandwiches was automatically trustworthy. "Rise and shine, buddy," Riley said, gently shaking one of the Guardian's spikes. "We're going on a field trip." The Guardian opened one massive eye, saw Riley, and made a sound like a happy whale. It had apparently decided she was the best thing to happen to it in centuries. "That's the spirit. Now, how do you feel about dramatically bursting through walls?" Because I've got a grand finale planned. Meanwhile, the observation deck had descended into chaos. The reversed gravity was the least of their problems. Emergency systems were activating randomly. Doors were sealing and unsealing in rhythm with the festive music. And the environmental controls had apparently decided everyone needed to experience a tropical beach atmosphere, complete with artificial sunshine and the sound of waves. "This is a disaster," Minister Kriltak wailed, his usually pristine appearance now disheveled from floating into the ceiling fan. "This is impossible," Vex Morian corrected. "The Nexus Gauntlet cannot be compromised. The security protocols alone." His sentence was interrupted by the wall exploding inward. Through the smoke and debris stepped Riley, riding on the back of the Guardian like the galaxy's most terrifying parade float. "Surprise," she announced. "Hope you don't mind me bringing a +1 to your little party." The Guardian, apparently enjoying its first social outing in millennia, waved one massive claw at the assembled aliens. Several of them fainted. Others began praying to various gods for a quick death. Riley hopped down and brushed dust off her clothes. "So about that trial. I passed, right? Because technically I survived all 7 chambers, made friends with your undefeatable monster, and even improved your facility's ambience. I'd say that's a solid A+ performance." You destroyed the Nexus Gauntlet," Vex Morian stammered. "I remodeled it. There's a difference. Now it's a fun house instead of a murder house. Much better for morale." Ambassador Quell Nax, who had managed to find something to hold on to during the gravity reversal, was the first to speak. "Captain Martinez, your species has certainly proven resilient." "Oh, we're just getting started," Riley grinned. "See, here's the thing about humans. We don't like being threatened. And we really don't like people trying to murder us with elaborate death traps. It brings out our petty side." She gestured to the chaos around them. "So here's my counter-proposal. Instead of testing whether humanity deserves to be part of your little galactic club, maybe you should prove you deserve to share space with us." That's not how this works," Kriltak protested weakly. "It is now," Riley said cheerfully. "Because I've taken the liberty of sending a full report of your rigged trial to every news network, diplomatic mission, and social media platform in the galaxy. Funny thing about evidence of systematic genocide, it tends to make people cranky." The silence that followed was the kind of silence that usually preceded either violence or very expensive legal settlements. "What do you want?" Vex Morian asked finally. "An apology would be nice. Some acknowledgement that maybe, just maybe, trying to murder entire species because they're inconvenient is bad form." And Riley paused dramatically. "I want a new job." "A job?" "Galactic mediator. Someone needs to keep an eye on you people. Make sure you're playing nice with the newer species. And frankly, after today's performance, I don't trust you to manage a bake sale, let alone interstellar relations." "That position doesn't exist," Kriltak said. "It does now," Riley replied. "The Guardian and I are a package deal. Aren't we, big guy?" The Guardian, who had been listening to the conversation with what might have been amusement, let out a rumble that shook the entire station. It was a sound of agreement, tinged with the promise of creative violence if anyone disagreed. And that was how Captain Riley "Reckless" Martinez became the galaxy's first human Guardian diplomatic team, a position that mostly involved preventing alien bureaucrats from doing stupid things while her partner provided intimidating backup. It wasn't the career path she'd planned, but then again, neither was accidentally destroying 3 space stations and a moon. As for the Nexus Gauntlet, it was converted into the galaxy's premier adventure tourism destination. Visitors could experience all the thrills of a deadly trial with none of the actual death. The Guardian worked part-time as a tour guide and absolutely loved meeting new people, especially if they brought snacks. The Galactic Council learned to be very, very careful about making threats they couldn't back up. And humanity settled comfortably into their new role as the species everyone wanted on their side, and no one wanted to annoy. Because as Riley had proven, a 2% survival rate was just another way of saying challenge accepted.